Have you ever caught your wife cheating and felt that gut punch of betrayal so raw it nearly paralyzed you? I never thought I'd be that guy, until that fateful night changed everything. I still remember it like a twisted scene in a movie. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I heard the unmistakable click of the front door unlocking. My heart hammered in my chest as I listened, barely daring to breathe, knowing deep down that nothing would ever be the same. I'd spent years believing our love was unbreakable, that even our fights were just part of a normal, messy relationship, but nothing could have prepared me for the shattering secret that was about to be unveiled. It all started innocently enough, or so I thought. My wife, always the picture of calm and control, casually mentioned she was taking a weekend getaway with her friends. I didn't think twice. After all, we'd been through enough storms to know that a little time apart was sometimes necessary. But then, I found it. A sleek, black suitcase stashed away in the back of our closet. Its contents far from ordinary. Inside was an envelope embossed with gold lettering and a crisp invitation to a private island retreat, a VIP event that reeked of luxury and exclusivity. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper, the words almost mocking me with their promise of a new life. And that's when I heard it, the one voice message that would haunt me for nights to come. On the deleted files of her phone, a deep, menacing male voice whispered, "Are you ready for your new life? There's no turning back." My stomach churned with dread and disbelief. What kind of life was she about to step into? And why was I left out of this twisted plan? I remember the night vividly. She returned home unexpectedly, not alone, but with a man who could only be described as dangerously captivating. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his eyes cold and calculating as if he'd been waiting for this moment all his life. And as if that wasn't enough, flanking him were two enormous dogs, their imposing presence accentuated by the unsettling sight of blood smeared across their muzzles. I froze, every instinct screaming that something was terribly, irreversibly wrong. In that surreal, heart-stopping moment, my entire world collapsed. I was caught in a vortex of anger, confusion, and a desperate need for answers. I couldn't just stand there and let it happen. Determined to uncover the truth behind this labyrinth of lies and betrayal, I embarked on a journey that would drag me into the dark underbelly of a secret world I never knew existed. At first, I tried to piece together the clues like a detective in a noir film. I scoured our home for hidden messages, discreet conversations, and any sign that could explain her sudden transformation from a loving wife to a mysterious accomplice. I replayed the voice message over and over, dissecting every syllable, every inflection that hinted at a plan far more sinister than mere infidelity. Late one sleepless night, I found myself crouched behind our living room couch, poring over old emails and texts, trying to detect any hidden codes or secret meetings mentioned in passing. That's when I stumbled upon a series of cryptic messages exchanged between her and an unknown contact. They spoke of destinations, dead drops, and the next move. I couldn't tell if it was a spy movie or the beginnings of an international scandal. The more I dug, the more I realized that my wife was entangled with forces far beyond a simple affair. She was in deep with a man who wasn't just any millionaire. He was someone who moved in shadows, orchestrating deals that danced on the edge of legality and morality. Driven by a mix of heartbreak and the desperate need to reclaim control over my life, I decided to follow the trail of breadcrumbs she'd left behind. I started by tracking her whereabouts through the few times she'd left her phone unattended, piecing together her secret rendezvous at upscale bars, discreet restaurants, and even a few abandoned warehouses on the outskirts of town. Every new clue plunged me further into a maze of luxurious deception and dangerous liaisons. I met with old friends who whispered rumors of a high-stakes underground circle, a world where fortunes were made and lost in a single clandestine handshake. One of them, a former detective turned private investigator, confided in me that this wasn't just about a wealthy playboy seducing a married woman, it was about power, influence, and an empire built on illicit transactions. The deeper I ventured, the more I began to see a pattern. Every time I thought I was getting closer to the truth, the layers would shift and reveal yet another secret. It was like peeling an onion, each layer more pungent and painful than the last. I recalled the night when, after a particularly grueling day of tailing her mysterious meetings, I found myself in a dimly lit parking garage outside a swanky hotel. There, I witnessed a heated exchange between my wife and the tuxedo-clad stranger. Their conversation was laced with urgency and coded language, a mix of promises and warnings. Couldn't make out every word, but the tone was unmistakable. This wasn't a casual tryst, it was a high-stakes deal. The man's eyes held a glint of ruthless determination, while my wife's face flickered with a mixture of fear, desire, and resignation. That night, as I lay awake in my car, parked in the shadows, I couldn't shake the image of her trembling hand as she clutched his arm. It was as if she was caught between the comfort of a familiar life and the seductive pull of a dangerous new world. I felt betrayed, not only by her actions, but by the fact that the life I thought we shared was nothing more than a carefully constructed facade. My mind raced with questions. Who was this man really? What did he want from her? And why did she seem almost resigned to her fate? I recalled our early years together, when our love had been a fierce, unyielding force that could conquer anything. But somewhere along the way, the vibrant colors of our love story had faded into a dull, monochrome betrayal. In a desperate bid for answers, I began to follow leads that took me from the glitzy corridors of high-rise corporate offices to the grimy back alleys of the city. I encountered figures who whispered secrets about a clandestine network that trafficked in more than just money. It traded in power, desire, and the dark undercurrents of human ambition. One such encounter occurred at a rundown diner in the dead of night. I sat across from a man whose eyes told 1,000 unspoken stories. He told me in hushed tones that my wife had been recruited by a secretive organization that specialized in using influential people to further their own twisted agenda. He hinted that her involvement was not entirely voluntary, that she had been lured in with promises of financial security and a taste of the glamorous life that she'd always dreamed of. As the pieces began to fall into place, I found myself grappling with a torrent of emotions. The anger I felt was intermingled with a strange sense of pity. Was she really a willing participant in this dangerous game? Or was she a victim trapped in a web of deceit, spun by a mastermind who knew exactly how to manipulate the vulnerable? The more I uncovered, the more I realized that the narrative of infidelity was merely the tip of an iceberg that plunged deep into a world of crime, corruption, and forbidden deals. I remember the moment I decided to confront her. It was a rainy evening, the kind of night where the world seems to drown in its own despair. I arrived at our house, drenched and shaking, determined to get answers once and for all. I found her in the living room, seemingly calm, as if nothing were amiss, her eyes betraying a hint of sadness I had never seen before. She looked at me with a mixture of resignation and sorrow, as though she were apologizing for a crime I could hardly fathom. Her voice was barely above a whisper as she explained that everything had spiraled out of her control. The invitation to the private island wasn't just an extravagant getaway, it was an initiation. That millionaire, the man in the tuxedo, had been recruiting her for something far larger than a mere dalliance. He had promised her a life free of financial worries, a life filled with excitement and adventure. But as she got deeper into this secret world, she began to realize that there was no escape once you crossed that threshold. The more she tried to back out, the tighter the noose of the organization became. I felt a mix of relief and horror. A part of me was relieved to finally have an explanation, yet horrified that the woman I loved had been sucked into such a sinister vortex. The conversation spiraled into confessions I never expected to hear. She recounted clandestine meetings in upscale hotels and secret rendezvous in remote locations, each event more surreal than the last. She admitted that the millionaire had showered her with expensive gifts and promises of a luxurious future, all while his true agenda remained hidden behind a veneer of charm and sophistication. The memory of that fateful night, when she returned home with that enigmatic man and his two vicious, bloodied dogs, haunted both of us. She confessed that she had felt a strange magnetism towards him, a pull that went beyond mere physical attraction. It was as if he embodied the very essence of power and danger, qualities that had lured her into a life she never intended to lead. That night, as the storm raged outside and our voices mingled with the sound of rain pelting the windows, I made a promise to myself. I vowed that I would not let this betrayal define me. I had to reclaim my life and, if possible, save her from the clutches of this merciless organization. In the days that followed, I began gathering evidence, reaching out to anyone who might know more about this secret network. I attended underground meetings and trailed shady figures who spoke in riddles about the next move and the inevitable reckoning. Each step brought me closer to a truth I was both terrified and compelled to uncover. One evening, I found myself in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, a place that reeked of rust and decay, yet buzzed with the promise of hidden revelations. I had arranged a clandestine meeting with an informant who claimed to have intimate knowledge of the organization's inner workings. In the dim glow of a single, flickering bulb, the man laid out a labyrinthine tale of power plays and secret alliances. He told me that the organization had been orchestrating a series of high-profile crimes for years, using influential individuals as pawns in a grand, dangerous game. My wife, he explained, was one of many who had been seduced by the lure of easy money and a taste of the glamorous life, only to find themselves ensnared in a trap with no way out. His words painted a picture of a sprawling network that reached into the highest echelons of society, where corruption and deceit were the norm. I listened, stunned, as he detailed covert operations, blackmail schemes, and a series of violent power struggles that had left a trail of shattered lives in their wake. The deeper I delved into this world, the more I began to see reflections of my own life. A man betrayed, left to pick up the pieces of a shattered dream. I recalled the long nights spent wondering where I'd gone wrong, questioning my own judgment and wondering if I had missed the signs. But now, armed with hard evidence and damning testimony, I was determined to confront the mastermind behind it all. I set out to track down the elusive millionaire, the man in the tuxedo who had ensnared my wife with promises of a new life. My investigation took me from luxurious penthouses to seedy backrooms, each encounter more surreal than the last. I began to piece together his network of influence, a web that stretched across continents, connecting powerful businessmen, corrupt politicians, and dangerous criminals. Every lead, every whispered rumor, led me to a crescendo of danger and intrigue. I remember one particularly harrowing night when I found myself trailing a black sedan through the neon-lit streets of downtown. The car moved with a calculated grace, and I could tell that it was being driven by someone who knew every dark alley and hidden shortcut in the city. I tailed it for miles, my pulse racing as I tried to keep up without being noticed. Finally, the car pulled up in front of an imposing mansion guarded by security personnel who eyed me suspiciously from behind tinted windows. I watched as the millionaire stepped out, his demeanor exuding an air of invincibility. With each step he took toward the mansion, I felt the weight of my own insignificance and the burning need for justice. I knew that this was my chance to confront him, to demand answers for the betrayal and the dangerous path my wife had been forced down. In the days that followed, I planned my approach meticulously, gathering every scrap of evidence and enlisting the help of a few trusted allies. I had to be careful. This was a man who operated in the shadows, whose power was measured not just in money, but in the lives he could ruin with a single phone call. The tension built up like a coiled spring inside me, and every moment felt like the calm before an inevitable storm. The night of the confrontation arrived with an eerie silence that belied the storm of emotions churning inside me. I found myself outside the gates of his mansion, the chill of the night air mingling with the heat of my anger. My mind raced with questions. Was this really about money? Or was it something far more sinister? And what about my wife? Could I save her from a fate worse than death? Or had she willingly surrendered herself to a world of darkness? As I pushed open the gate and crept toward the mansion, memories of happier times with her flashed before my eyes, a time when love had seemed so pure and unbreakable. Now, every step I took was laden with the bittersweet taste of loss and the relentless drive for retribution. Inside the mansion, I discovered a scene that was both opulent and ominous. Lavish decorations adorned every corner, yet beneath the glittering surface lurked an unmistakable air of menace. I followed the sound of hushed voices down a long corridor, and soon found myself at the threshold of a grand, dimly lit room. There, I witnessed a meeting in progress. The millionaire, still clad in his immaculate tuxedo, sat at the head of a long table surrounded by shadowy figures whose eyes glowed with ambition and greed. My wife was there, her face a mask of conflicting emotions, guilt, fear, and a strange, almost hypnotic resignation. The meeting was tense, punctuated by the clinking of glasses and whispered negotiations that seemed to seal fates with every word. I stood frozen in the doorway, the weight of the situation crashing down on me like a tidal wave. The conversation turned to details that made my blood run cold. A plot to manipulate markets, to control lives through blackmail and coercion, and to eliminate anyone who dared stand in their way. My wife was now an unwilling cog in this elaborate machine, her role both crucial and tragic. It was then that the millionaire caught my eye, his gaze slicing through the room like a knife. For a brief, terrifying moment, it was as if time stood still. I felt the raw intensity of his stare, a silent challenge that dared me to act, to intervene, and to reclaim what had been stolen from me. In that charged moment, I realized that the battle I was about to fight was not just for my own dignity, but for the soul of a woman I once loved dearly. The lines between right and wrong blurred in the face of a reality that was more complex than I had ever imagined. My resolve hardened like steel. I would expose this web of corruption, even if it meant tearing apart everything I once held dear. I slipped away from the room unnoticed, my mind racing with plans of sabotage and rebellion against the forces that had robbed me of my happiness. Over the following weeks, I became a man possessed. I meticulously gathered every scrap of evidence, recording clandestine meetings, hacking into encrypted files, and enlisting the help of a few like-minded individuals who had their own scores to settle with the criminal underworld. Every night, I pored over the data, trying to piece together a coherent narrative that could bring this monstrous organization to its knees. The deeper I dug, the more I began to see how intricately my life had been woven into a tapestry of deceit, power, and moral decay. I discovered that the organization had its tendrils in every facet of society, from high finance to law enforcement, and even in the halls of political power. The realization was both humbling and enraging. I was just one man, but I refused to be crushed by the enormity of their influence. During this time, I confronted my own demons. I wrestled with the conflicting emotions of love and betrayal, of anger and pity. I began to understand that my wife, too, was a victim of a system that preyed on vulnerability and desperation. In quiet moments of introspection, I recalled the promises we had made to each other, vows of loyalty and support, and how those promises had been shattered by the insidious lure of a world far darker than I had ever imagined. The night I finally decided to confront her face-to-face remains etched in my memory. We met in a secluded park under a sky that was a patchwork of stars and shadows. The conversation was raw and unfiltered, filled with anguished revelations and bitter truths. She confessed that she had been lured into this life by the promise of a secure future, a life free of financial worries, but that once she was in, escape was impossible. She admitted that the power and money had intoxicated her, clouding her judgment until it was too late. Yet amid the confession, there was an unmistakable glimmer of regret, a hint that she longed to break free from the chains that bound her. As I absorbed her words, I realized that our paths, once so deeply intertwined, had diverged into territories marked by betrayal and irreversible choices. I could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on me, but I also knew that this was the moment of truth. It was time to decide whether I would succumb to despair or rise up and fight back against the forces that had torn my world apart. In that moment of clarity, I resolved to take a stand, not just for myself, but for everyone ensnared in the organization's ruthless grip. The climax of this saga came unexpectedly one foggy night. I had arranged a secret meeting with one of the organization's insiders, a disillusioned former operative who had grown tired of the endless cycle of greed and violence. We met in an abandoned industrial park, a place where the ghosts of old machinery whispered secrets of past glories and failures. Under the dim glow of a flickering streetlight, he handed me a flash drive, its contents promising to expose the inner workings of the entire operation. With trembling hands, I reviewed the files on my laptop, detailed blueprints of illicit financial transactions, records of bribery, and evidence of violent purges designed to eliminate threats. The documents painted a damning picture, a global network of corruption that spanned continents and implicated figures of unimaginable power. But even as I prepared to blow the whistle on this monstrous conspiracy, fate intervened in the most unexpected way. A trusted friend and former colleague, who had long been skeptical of the organization's influence, reached out with a startling revelation. He claimed that there was a hidden layer to the whole affair, a secret that went beyond mere greed and power. According to him, my wife's involvement was not entirely coerced by the promise of wealth. She had been working as an undercover agent, a double agent of sorts, embedded deep within the organization in a bid to dismantle it from the inside. The information was staggering. She had been feeding critical intelligence to a covert government task force for months, all while maintaining the facade of a seduced, wayward wife. The implications were staggering. Everything I'd witnessed, every betrayal, every painful revelation, had been part of a far more complex game than I could ever have imagined. The revelation hit me like a bolt of lightning, shattering the world I thought I knew. My heart ached with conflicting emotions. Relief that she wasn't simply a victim of lust and greed, and anger that I had been kept in the dark about her true mission. I recalled the moment when she had returned home with that enigmatic man in the tuxedo and the two monstrous dogs, their muzzles smeared with blood, a scene that had burned itself into my memory. Was it all part of her cover? Was the violent display merely a calculated move to intimidate her enemies and secure her position within the organization? The questions swirled relentlessly in my mind, each one deepening the mystery and my own sense of isolation. I reached out to her one final time, determined to uncover the complete truth. Our conversation was raw and unfiltered, a collision of shattered illusions and desperate confessions. She admitted that she had been coerced into into the role at first, seduced by promises of security in a world that was anything but secure. But as she delved deeper into the covert operations, she realized that the organization's true aim was far more sinister than I had ever imagined. Her cover had been her only way out, a desperate bid to bring the criminals down from within. In that moment, I understood that the betrayal I had felt was only one facet of a much larger, heart-wrenching tragedy. I was caught in a vortex where love, duty, and deception intertwined in a dangerous dance, a dance that threatened to consume us all. In the days that followed, armed with the incriminating evidence and a newfound determination to right the wrongs, I joined forces with law enforcement and the covert task force. The final showdown was as dramatic as it was inevitable. In a meticulously planned raid on the organization's central hub, a derelict warehouse in the heart of the city, we struck with a precision that seemed to defy the darkness that had long reigned. The operation was fraught with peril. Every moment a tightrope walk between chaos and order. Bullets flew, and the sound of shattering glass echoed through the vast space as the criminals scrambled to escape. In the midst of the pandemonium, I found myself face to face with the man in the tuxedo, his icy gaze now filled with a desperate fury. The confrontation was electric, a collision of past grievances and the unyielding resolve to dismantle a corrupt empire. In that final, heart-stopping moment, as the dust settled and the echoes of gunfire faded into a heavy silence, I looked into his eyes and saw not just a ruthless criminal, but a man who had lost himself to the lure of power and bloodshed. The realization was profound and painful. The true enemy was not just the shadowy organization, but the very greed and ambition that had corrupted the world we once believed in. My wife, standing by his side at one point, had been the linchpin in a much larger scheme, a pawn whose sacrifice would eventually lead to the collapse of an empire built on lies. The raid culminated in a chaotic yet cathartic resolution. The criminals were arrested, and the evidence I had painstakingly gathered formed the backbone of a case that would shake the very foundations of the criminal underworld. In the aftermath, as the dust settled and the city began to reclaim its shattered sense of normalcy, I found myself standing alone in the ruins of what once was a beautiful life. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also ignited a fire within me, a relentless drive to seek justice and to rebuild from the ashes of deception. As I reflect on those tumultuous months, the memories still haunt me like vivid nightmares, each one a reminder of how quickly a life built on trust can crumble in the face of ambition and manipulation. I learned that love, when intertwined with secrets and lies, can be both a blessing and a curse, capable of lifting you to unimaginable heights or plunging you into the darkest depths. My wife's double life, her dangerous liaison with the enigmatic millionaire, had irrevocably altered the course of our destiny. And yet, in the midst of all the chaos, there was a glimmer of hope, a realization that sometimes the greatest betrayals can lead to the most unexpected paths of redemption. In the final days of that bitter saga, as I sat in a quiet cafe watching the world go by, I pondered the true nature of betrayal and forgiveness. The scars remained, a constant reminder of a love lost and a trust shattered. But with the organization dismantled and the mastermind behind bars, I also recognized that there was a chance for healing, a chance to rebuild not just the remnants of a broken marriage, but my own identity as a man who had faced the abyss and come out on the other side. I learned that sometimes the hardest battles are fought within ourselves, and that forgiveness, even when it seems impossible, can be the first step toward reclaiming a future once thought irretrievably lost. Now, as I close this painful chapter of my life, I carry with me the memories of every agonizing moment and every hard-won victory. I know that the path ahead will be long and fraught with challenges, but I also know that I have emerged from the darkness stronger and more resolute than ever before. In the end, the betrayal that once shattered my world has paradoxically paved the way for a new beginning, a chance to rebuild, to forgive, and to redefine what it means to truly love. And as I take that tentative step into a future I never imagined possible, I can only whisper to myself, with a mixture of sorrow and hope, I finally understand what it means to rise from the ashes of betrayal.